Excellent. We are now official. Dun, dun, dun. Couple of announcements. Reminder about the movie this evening. 117 Music Building. Come and watch the movie and join in conversation with your classmates and then write a reflection about it for extra credit. So that's coming up. And then also just a quick reminder that we have our field trip coming up. Our field trip. Thanks. Field trip coming up on Sunday, April 6th. So you'll be hearing from your TA very soon about what time you'll be getting on the bus. You'll hop on the bus at the creamery or beside the creamery, and then you'll ride out to Stone Valley, Shavers Creek, walk in the woods, hanging out, doing some activities, being with your group, and then return to campus about 5 hours later. There's no regularly scheduled lab that week, so you will not have lab on April 4th. Well, that would be April 3rd or April 4th. And so just the field trip that week on Sunday. And now, diving into class. I'd like you to think about, as your meditation today, bringing into your awareness, using all of your equipment, there on page 97, I want you to reflect on your top 3 priorities for today. Top 3 priorities for today. So take a quiet moment by yourself to do this as our centering. Recording them in your journal because we're going to use them later. So top 3. Relating to your head, your heart, your gut. All right. So what we've been going through, the ideas that we've been wrestling with, relate to this story. This story. So some connections. So there was a soldier. This is a story told by an Israeli man. So while he was in the Israeli Defense Force, his commander took him to the beach one day and said, "Eliav, pick up 2 handfuls of sand." And Eliav did as he was told. So he had sand in both hands. And the commander said, "Keep one hand open and close the other hand as tightly as possible. Clenched fist." Okay. So if you're feeling this story, you can do that yourself. Feeling the space in your open hand compared to the space in your closed hand. Eliav did as he was told. Now open the clenched fist and compare the amount of sand you have, right, in the one that remained open and the one that was clenched closed. Which has more sand in it? And so as Eliav observed this, he said, the open hand has more sand in it. The commander said, that's correct. It is, in fact, as we try to hold more tightly that we actually lose. We lose the sand. What is the parable here? What is the lesson to be taken? Parables are teaching stories. Does anybody have ideas about this? The open hand holds more than the closed hand. Mhm. So what we've been holding are ideas, right? We've been holding ideas. And what happens is sometimes we hold ideas so tightly inside our bodies that they get clenched, right? They get held so tightly and that we don't have space for more things. So if we hold our ideas loosely in an open hand, in our open mind, then the ideas can come in, right? They can refill, they can refresh, they can be piled up in a way that we can hold more ideas and beliefs and thoughts and feelings than if we are clenched and closed. So I'd like you to continue to think about that, being open to the newness that's available, and considering what is that sand, what are the things that you hold so tightly, but that actually might get refreshed and open if you unclenched just a little bit. The belief systems that you hold on to, or have been holding, that are now ready to do some shifting. Right? So we're going to do some more of that today. Shifting of ideas, possibilities. So this is where we were looking at this, thinking about the symptoms are the things that we see as going on the planet. Under here, we've been talking about the problems and the root causes. Last time in class, this was my proposal that the symptoms that we're seeing is a result of separation from self, separation from each other, and separation from Earth, ecocide. Remember, the CIDE means to cut off. Eco being the world, the ecology of the world, the way things fit together. So we've been cutting those things off, cutting off connections. And after many generations of this, we are feeling disconnected. We're feeling, these innovations that we have shifted our culture in ways that the innovators could not have foretold, right? They didn't expect. And so today, building on this idea, I'd like to add to it our story. Remember the stories that we carry. I'm saying today that the story that our culture has been teaching us has created separation. So this is where we're going to dive in today. So this is my hypothesis, if you remember back to the scientific method. So I've made some observations, I've asked some questions. I now have a hypothesis about our culture and how that has created this story of separation. And now what we're going to do today is experiment with it. See what you think of it, of my hypothesis, and I'll see what I think of it. It's always shifting and changing, but let's play with it a little bit, experimenting. So this is our culture, right? These are all kinds of things that go into culture, or how our culture is put on display, how it is built, how it is used, attitudes, beliefs, language, customs, rituals, behaviors, faith and religion, food, art, drama, music, all build up our culture. So if you think of the places where, it might be your family culture, what are the things that you do that are just, for me, we had always had Sunday dinner together, right? That was part of my family culture. We always celebrated, let's see, a good example. Let's see, we always celebrated Halloween by going to my grandparents' house and trick-or-treating, even when we were way too old to trick-or-treat. That was a custom of ours, a celebration. So you might think about your family as a culture. You could think of your hometown and its culture, or you could even expand it to the culture of the United States, the culture of human beings. So we are part of all these, the culture of Penn State, right? We're part of all these different cultures, ways that these things get enacted. And so today I'd like to specifically focus on American culture. American culture. So the stories that have shaped our country over the course of many years, going back to this, right? 1493, Columbus sailed the ocean blue. Pope Alexander VI offered a spiritual validation for European conquest. He said that in our times, especially the Catholic faith and the Christian religion, be exalted and everywhere be increased and spread, that the health of souls be cared for, and that barbarous nations, who by the way had their own culture, be overthrown and brought to the faith itself. This was the European Christian purity and supremacy, and that supremacy went like this. Then, taking in these photos, God blessed them and said unto them, and be fruitful and multiply, have dominion over the fish of the sea and the fowl of the air. And so the Christian faith got spread across the world, across our country. And so dominion, they brought in cattle, right? And pigs. The culture of pigs is fascinating, the history of pigs and how they have shaped the American landscape over the course of so many years before us. It's fascinating. We can cut down trees of any size and all size. We can catch as many fish as we want. We can trap as many animals as we want. So we have dominion over, right? This is the supremacy. When the Bible was written, it was estimated that there were about 300 million people on the planet, just for reference. So people were understanding and believing that this is what they needed to do. And it continued, right? The idea of manifest destiny. Americans had a virtue-bound biblical duty to colonize the West. So this is the Louisiana Purchase. Yes, this feels like a history class, and yet I think you're going to see that it's pretty important. It seems odd now that some French explorers came to North America. They did some surveying. They claimed this big green piece of land extending over much of North America and into Canada. And they just said, this is ours. And then in 1803, the United States government under President Jefferson purchased this territory of Louisiana from the French. So go back in time as much as you can possibly imagine about that. What was in this space? What was in this space? President James Polk is the leader most associated with manifest destiny. The idea that we have to move Christianity, we have to move human beings, European beings, across this land. The idea of westward expansion that also carried slavery and dominion of people over this land. Without slavery, it was believed you could not have civilization. 1845, right? This wasn't that long ago in reality. There were people who didn't agree with manifest destiny. Grover Cleveland, Andrew Carnegie, Mark Twain. There were people that weren't in for this, except that it became a disputed philosophy, but ultimately, well, we know what happened, right? So in this great big land, as you imagine what was happening here, all of the nature that was happening here, but then all of the people I understand that this is hard to read right now because of all these little words. All these little words are tribes. They're tribes of people who lived here before. That whole area, this whole thing, was already populated. There were already people living here. 60 million indigenous people before the landing of Columbus in 1492. About 54 million of them out of 60 million died between 1492 and then 1900, either because of, at the hands of white men who were conquering, or because of disease that they brought. 90%. Smallpox, measles, influenza. These people were already struggling when Manifest Destiny happened in the 1840s. So these European Americans it was genocide. It was straight up genocide. It was their story to conquer this land, these people, the native peoples who were living in a different story. These native peoples believing that they belong to Earth, that are part of Earth, that we're celebrating, right? They were unable to see that these native people were living in their own story, their own culture, their own ways of being. The natives believed that it was ludicrous that humans could own a greater being, the land. They saw all beings as animate and interconnected. But what happened to them is that their cultures were smushed and burnt out in a lot of cases. The children of the natives were taken and placed in boarding schools, and this is what led to their cultural genocide. So if we think back to what culture meant, right, the integrated patterns of human knowledge and beliefs and behaviors that pass on from one generation to the next, came to an end, right? They're characteristic features of everyday life. The children were taken to these boarding schools in order that they were going to kill the Indian to save the man. 519 of these schools in the United States and 219 of them in Canada. So this is what happened here before us. This is part of our story. This was their story of success. This is what our culture today is built on. It's built on separation. It's built on not understanding culture. It's built on conquering. It's built on hyper-individualism. And so when we then translate this story, even from the 1800s to 1900, early 1900s, this is still carried on as part of our culture. So then in our culture, what do you see? What does it mean to be a success? Thank goodness these days, right, of this era of genocide are over. And yet there are other things happening right now, other ways the story is showing up. So for you, what have you been taught? What do you understand that it means to be a success in our culture today? So take a moment and write in your journal 3 things to be successful. I need to, and then talk to your neighbor after you've written your 3. All right. I would love to hear from some of you. What's success? Yes.
For me to be successful, I need to like get a good career.
And what does that lead to? Why a good career? And what does good mean?
Like good paying.
Good paying.
Like I feel like that's just like I don't know, in society I feel like that's like a common thing, like
Yeah.
to be successful.
Yes, a good career, a good paying career. Mhm. Other thoughts? Here's someone else up here. Oh, thank you.
I would say in my culture, to be successful, I need to be educated.
Educated, cool. In any particular, does education then lead to, what does that lead to?
So, like, educated on my own culture, but also educated, like, in the traditional sense, like schooling.
Okay,
So it can lead to me having a successful future.
yes, okay. Thank you. Having an education, formal education and cultural education. What else?
Make mom and dad feel proud.
And what does that take? I don't know where you are. Thank you, sorry.
Yeah, sorry, what?
And what does that look like? Like what makes them feel proud?
I don't know, just whatever it takes.
That's a lot to give. Mhm,
Thank you.
thank you. Mhm. How many of you can resonate or had something like that on your list? Any of those answers? Yeah, almost everybody had at least one of those. So you've hit on some big things, right? Education, money, success in the eyes of your parents, the people who raised you. So it's a lot of pressure. I feel for you. I feel for us, right? That this is our story. So we're going to do a thought experiment here. What's our story? Pretend you're extraterrestrials. Okay, already it might be challenging. Just do your best. Pretend you are extraterrestrials cruising placidly through deep space when suddenly you come upon planet Earth. Your team's superior powers allow you to quietly land unnoticed in the United States and blend in with the Earthlings. Your first task is to observe Americans enacting their lives in a variety of settings: homes, schools, supermarkets, job sites, sporting events, prisons, churches, etc. In so doing, you soon notice that Americans spend a lot of time working, receiving something they call money in return for their labor. You note as well that they use money to acquire all manner of things: houses, cars, clothes, food, gadgets, furnishings, property, and on and on. By tracking their daily conversations, you deduce that these Americans believe that access to stuff ensures their well-being. So it is that you summarize the story of this culture with the formula: work to get money, to get stuff, to get well-being. You name this story economism because in this culture, it appears that the purpose and meaning of life is viewed primarily through the lens of economic activity: working, consuming, investing, inventing, manufacturing, buying, selling, and so forth. As your investigation continues, you find that the central purpose of schools in this society is to train young people to join the workforce, thereby ensuring that the economy thrives. You also discover that the primary role of government is to promote policies ensuring that businesses flourish. As for planet Earth, it is regarded primarily as a supply house for raw materials and a depository for waste. Your team goes on to visit other countries and concludes that economism is a global phenomenon. It is at this point that Mission Control directs you to determine how well is this story of economism actually working. Are people happy? Do their lives have significant meaning and purpose? Are they generous and caring toward each other? Is their home, planet Earth, becoming ever more healthy, vibrant, and beautiful? Seeking answers, your team sets to work, this time surveying all available research archives and media outlets to access the effects of economism on planet Earth and her people. Despite the immensity of this task, it soon becomes evident that the health and well-being of planet Earth is in decline. Climate chaos, widespread species extinction, growing ocean acidification, widespread freshwater contamination, along with soil loss, provide plenty of evidence. As for Earth's human inhabitants, your team discovers massive inequalities in wealth distribution, with the richest 1% of humans possessing more wealth than the rest of humankind combined. Strife and violence are prevalent in many households and communities, and a multitude of conflicts among nation states. Your team is forced to conclude that economism spreads separation rather than connection, suffering rather than healing, stress rather than harmony. In your report to headquarters, you posit that all this unhappiness is occurring because economism is designed to care about one thing: maximizing money. It doesn't care if you are happy or miserable, if you are fulfilled or hollow, if you are humane or brutish, if you are gentle or spiteful. It doesn't care if the oceans dry up and die or teem joyously. It doesn't care if the skies turn to ash. It doesn't care if you or me, our grandkids, or the planet dies young or old, or if any of us live or die at all. It just doesn't care. Economism wasn't designed to care. Your team finishes its reporting, declaring, if humans continue to declare their allegiance to the story of economism, their civilization will collapse in an apocalypse marked by unimaginable suffering. The story of success that we have created is just a story. It is just a story. Work, money, consumption, happiness. You can write down economism in your journal. Economism. It is a term used in the analytics of capitalist economics to point to the social and psychological damage that occurs when all life's richness, wonder, and complexity is reduced to economic dimensions. Here's an example of how this story shows up related to a class that we did last week, right? The idea that there is this empty hole, that there is never enough. We've talked about not enoughness as a marketing opportunity. The things that are advertised on TikTok or Instagram, the things that are quick to buy, the things that we think are feeding us, the things that we think that we want. You're not okay, but buy this and you will be. It's an empty hole, right? That can't, well, you can think of it as addiction as the empty hole. Never enough stuff, never enough phone scrolling or food or drugs or shopping, video games, busyness, stuff. But we're never going to succeed because we're treating the symptoms and not the root causes. So the whole is the story that we are not enough, never enough, unhappy inside. And so everything we see out there is shaped by what's going on inside. So here's a very specific example. Beauty is a construct created by the capitalist system to make you see flaws that don't exist, to sell you things you don't need. We talked about this the other day. Not pretty enough, not handsome enough. So what do you see when you think about the purpose of school, the purpose of government, the purpose of Earth, the purpose of college? So take a moment and talk to your neighbor about this. Now add this to your conversation. How do you see the story of economism connected to your answers about success? Or not? Continue. I would love to hear a couple of thoughts about this. Would anyone care to share thoughts with the group about this? Your experiences, your observations, your own hypotheses?
Um, I'm over here. I feel like they connect because if you don't go to school or college, like you won't be seen as successful. Um, I feel like that's just how it is now. It's like with our generation especially, it's like harder to get a job without a college degree, but it's still hard to get a job with a college degree. So I feel like it's just like you have to be like pre-generationally either like wealthy or like have connections to like continue that success, I guess.
Thanks for saying that. What a conundrum, right? Gosh. Thank you, Zach.
Yeah, that I agree that college is also really important. It helps you like become educated and helps you lead to like a better job. And I feel like people say like money can't buy happiness, but I feel like to a certain degree it can because money it's required for everything in this world. So I believe that better education, better job, higher paying, more happy.
He's, that's an insight into what we'll be talking about on Monday. So thank you. We'll expand on that idea.
Personally, I don't think college is like necessary, but I think school is necessary because especially in America, you want to have an educated citizenship so that they can like vote somebody into the government that could make changes for the earth, for the population. So I don't think college is necessary, but I think having an understanding about how the world works from school is really important.
Thank you. Interesting.
I feel like school's only right for the right person because, like, I feel like there's a lot of people in this world that are in high school and they kind of hate school and they kind of just want to go somewhere else, like become a contractor or be a plumber. Like, there's a lot of like places in this world you can go without education. Like, education's not the number one thing for everybody. Like, obviously, it's very important to me. I wouldn't be here without it, but like to different people, there's like different goals in life depending on where you're at, like going into high school, coming out of high school.
Thank you. Yeah, I think, and all of those things are necessary too, right? All of the ways that those different jobs fit together in our culture are really important. And so that's really interesting. Yeah, it is tough to navigate and a lot to think about. So I'd like to show you, hey Autumn, could you bring up that website, please? These are, what I'm about to show you is today's economism heroes. Right? This is the world time list of the real time list, excuse me, of world billionaires. Today, just stop right there if you would. This, I snapshotted this yesterday afternoon. Since 5 o'clock, so that would have been 5 o'clock on Monday, as of, but you know, the previous day, Elon Musk was up $5.5 billion from the day before, $2.5 billion, $2.2 billion, up from the day before, right? These poor people down 2.3 billion, down 2.5 billion, right? Could you scroll up just a little bit for me? It's like, sorry, scroll down, I guess would be technically. And it goes on and on. It lists, you know, all of the billionaires on a day-to-day basis. So when we think about this and think about how I've contributed to these people's wealth, what have I bought on Amazon? What time have I spent on Facebook? You know, there are people here, Walmart people, those are the Waltons that are there. So how have I contributed to their wealth is an interesting point of reflection, I think. But then also, what is $1 billion? So you might want to write this math problem that I'm just about to give you down so that you can visualize it if you're a visual person. How much is $1 billion? So write down $100 per day. And then it would take you 10 million days to save up $1 billion. Then you can write this down. That's 27,387.26 years. So if I saved $100 a day for the next 27,000 years, I would have $1 billion. It's pretty hard to comprehend what $1 billion is. So when we think about these people who, these, as we scroll down, that they have 82 billion or, even 1 billion, it's pretty crazy amounts of money to comprehend. The world's billionaires have more wealth between them than 4.6 billion other people on the planet, according to a 2020 study by Oxfam. And I bet that has changed dramatically even in the last 5 years. So as we get down here to number 62, number 62 is Mackenzie Scott with $29.1 billion. She is related to Amazon. She's Jeff Bezos's ex. She gets 4% of Amazon. And I'm highlighting her because she's looking at her wealth in a different way. Since 2019, she has given away $19 billion to nonprofit organizations. So actually, the last time I did this class in the fall, she was number 52. She's dropped 10 places because she has given away billions of dollars since last fall. It's hard to give away that much money. It's hard to even find how to gift it. And yet I highlight her because she's doing her best. She's leading the way. She is changing the world of nonprofit organizations and what they can offer to people, their services. So it's not necessarily that money is bad. That's not what I'm preaching. It's how you choose to get it. It's how you choose to use it. What's the in and the out? What is the cycle? What is the culture of what money does, right? So as we go through, and as we've been talking about, right, these terrible pictures, and yet understanding that economism is just a story. The story of taking rather than giving, a story of fear rather than love, a story of separation rather than connection. There are students who have taken this class that say, this isn't environmental science, except here it is, pretty well spelled out, that all of these things connect. We can't talk about environmental science and understand what's happening in this world today if we don't talk about economy and psychology and philosophy and sociology, because it's all connected. It's all part of everything that we do, how all of that relates to the environment and what we're using. So this is an image that I have shown a couple of times, right? These are old stories that had to go away. They took a lot of energy to go away. Our story of economism is that it was an old story that was no longer true. Truth can go out of stories, you know. What was true becomes meaningless and even a lie because the truth has gone into another story. So, what is that story going to be? We can use all of our capacities to figure out the new story. I'm going to share with you to close another teaching story. One day, a fisherman was lying on a beautiful beach with his fishing pole propped up in the sand and his solitary line cast out into the sparkling blue surf. He was enjoying the warmth of the afternoon sun and the prospect of catching a fish. About that time, a businessman came walking down the beach, trying to relieve some of the stress of his workday. He noticed the fisherman sitting on the beach and decided to figure out why the fisherman was fishing instead of working harder to make a living for himself and his family. "You aren't going to catch many fish that way," the businessman said to the fisherman. "You should be working rather than lying on the beach." The fisherman looked up at the businessman and smiled. "And what will my reward be?" "Well, you can get bigger nets and catch more fish," was the businessman's answer. "And then what will my reward be?" the fisherman asked. The businessman replied, "You will make money and you'll be able to buy a boat, which will then result in even larger catches of fish." "And then what will my reward be?" said the fisherman, smiling. The businessman was beginning to get a little irritated with the fisherman's questions. "Well, then you can buy a bigger boat and hire some people to work for you," he said. "And then what will my reward be?" asked the fisherman again. Now the businessman was angry. "Don't you understand? You can build up a fleet of fishing boats, sail all over the world, and let your employees catch fish for you." Once again, the fisherman asked, "Then what will my reward be?" The businessman was red with rage and shouted at the fisherman, "Don't you understand that you can become so rich that you will never have to work for your living again? You can spend all the rest of your days sitting on this beach looking at the sunset. You won't have a care in the world." And the fisherman, still smiling, looked up and said, "And what do you think I'm doing right now?" You must first realize the prison of your mind before you can escape it. So, do you see your priorities today reflected in what your story of success means? Take some time to reflect, and I hope that you have a beautiful day. Yeah. Oh.